Morning, all. All right, so we are up to the 1941-1942 season. As you can see, it's still just one division. There are still 7 teams. You'll notice the Americans have changed their name, and we will discuss. So the New York Rangers are the number 1 team in the National Hockey League that season. They finished 29-17-2. They're atop the league with 60 points. Toronto is next at 27-18-3, 57 points. They're now coached by Hap Day. Dick Irvin, of course, moving on to Montreal. The Boston Bruins, 25-17-6 for 56 points, and they're coached by Art Ross, who, of course, the trophy for the scoring title is named after. Then you got the Chicago Blackhawks, 22-23-3, 47 points. Detroit, 19-25-4 for 42 points. Montreal stays bad, but not as bad as they were a couple seasons before. 18-27-3 for 39 points. And then the Brooklyn Americans finished 16-29-3 for 35 points. So with the Americans, Red Dutton becomes the owner of the team. And he decides to try to, generate some more interest locally in the team. He changes the name to Brooklyn, like the Dodgers in baseball. So the idea is simple, to try to build this rivalry within the city. It doesn't really work out for the Americans, but yeah, Red did everything he could to try to keep that team afloat, and nothing but respect for him. Hextall, Patrick, and Watson take over as the most productive NHL line. They are on the New York Rangers, as the Bruins Kraut line has joined in the war efforts. Even though Boston loses their entire top line, who go over to serve in World War II, they stay near the top of the league. So kudos to the Bruins for being able to do so. The Leafs win their first cup since 1932. It was their 7th trip to the finals since their last Stanley Cup win. So they had a lot of losses in finals, but here they are winning it again. November 27th of 1941, the Bruins tie an NHL record with 4 goals in a 10-minute overtime period. Yep, it wasn't sudden death. It's the weirdest thing. I'm not sure why you'd make overtime not sudden death, but they did. And so, 4 goals by the Bruins in overtime ties a record. April 14th, I should say, of 1942, the Leafs score 9 goals in a Stanley Cup final game, a record which stands to this day. And, I don't think we'll ever see that get beaten necessarily. I don't think we'll see 10 in a Stanley Cup final game. March 8th of 1942, Bill Mosienko sets a record with 3 goals in 21 seconds, a record which stands to this day. I don't think there's any danger of that record actually being beaten. Travel restrictions are in place on adults during World War II. It is a tough, tense time around the world, and that means that with travel restrictions on adults, the NHL has a greater demand for junior age players because they don't have the same restrictions on their movement. Harvey Busher Jackson says no to signing with Brooklyn. Absolutely flat out refuses. So they sell him off to the Boston Bruins instead. Frank Patrick has a heart attack. He was the owner of the Montreal Canadiens. There was some fear that they would move to Cleveland. Tommy Gorman actually is the reason that the Habs don't end up moving. He takes over the team. Just imagine if they'd become Cleveland and the Montreal Canadiens were no more. How bizarre that would have been. So, Brian Hextall's the leading scorer in the NHL, 48 games, 24 goals, 32 assists for 56 points. Lynn Patrick, his line mate, is right behind him. 47 games, 32 goals, 22 assists, 54 points. Solid scoring season there for Patrick. Don Grosso of the Detroit Red Wings, 48 games, 23 goals, 30 assists, 53 points. Phil Watson, who is the line mate to Lynn Patrick and Brian Hextall, he is 4th in the scoring. So almost 1, 2, 3 in scoring. Very close. 48 games, 15 goals, 37 assists, 52 points. Sid Abel of the Detroit Red Wings, 48 games, 18 goals, 31 assists, 49 points. Toe Blake of Montreal, 48 games, 17 goals, 28 assists, 45 points. And Bill Toms of Chicago, 47 games, 15 goals, 30 assists, 45 points. In the goaltending department, Jim Henry ends up leading the league in wins with a record of 29-17-2, 2.9 goals against average and 1 shutout. Turk Broda of the Toronto Maple Leafs, 27-18-3, 2.76 goals against average and 6 shutouts. Frank Brimsek of the Boston Bruins, 24-17-6 record, 2.35 goals against and 3 shutouts. Sam Lopresti of the Chicago Blackhawks is next at 21-23-3, 3.18 goals against average and 3 shutouts as well. So, the Hart Trophy goes to Tom Anderson, a defenseman on the Boston Bruins. The Calder goes to Grant Warwick of the New York Rangers. The Vezina goes to Frank Brimsek of the Boston Bruins. And the Lady Byng goes to Sil Apps of the Toronto Maple Leafs. So your All-Stars, your NHL All-Stars that year, Sil Apps is the first-team All-Star down the middle for Toronto. Second-team All-Stars, Phil Watson of the New York Rangers. On the right side, Brian Hextall of the New York Rangers is your first-team All-Star. Gordie Drillin of the Toronto Maple Leafs is your second-team All-Star. On the left side, Lynn Patrick of the New York Rangers is first team. So that entire line is first or second team all across. Sid Abel of the Detroit Red Wings is your second line left winger when it comes to the League All-Stars. On the blue line, Earl Siebert of Chicago is on the first team. Tom Anderson of Boston on the first team. Pat Egan of the Brooklyn Americans is on the second team, along with Bucko McDonald of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Bucko McDonald. What a great hockey name. In net, Frank Brimsek of the Boston Bruins is your first-team All-Star, and Turk Broda of the Toronto Maple Leafs is your second-team All-Star. So when we look at the playoffs, the format is still screwy. 1 plays 2 in a semifinal best of 7. 3 plays 4. 5 plays 6 in quarterfinals. Again, I don't understand why 3 doesn't play 6, 4 doesn't play 5, and they go on to play. The winners of these series would then play the Rangers and Toronto respectively, who just get a bye into the next round. I don't understand. Just give me a time machine back to 1930. I can fix their format. The quarterfinal, Boston beat Chicago in the first game, 2-1 in overtime. Chicago then beats Boston 4-0 in the second game before Boston wins game 3, 3-2 at home and wins the series 2-1. The other quarterfinal, Detroit beats Montreal 2-1 in the first game. Montreal wins the second game handedly 5-0 before Detroit wins the third game 6-2 to win the series 2-1 as well. This sets up Boston and Detroit in the semifinal. Detroit wins 6-4 in the first game, 3-1 in the second game to sweep the series. Best 2 out of 3 again, so 2-0. Detroit needing 5 games to get to the Stanley Cup final. Toronto, they win against the Rangers in the first game 3-1. The second game goes to Toronto 4-2. The Rangers then fight their way back into it with a 3-0 victory in game 3. Game 4 is in Toronto. It's a 2-1 win for the Rangers. The Rangers win game 5 3-1 to keep their hope alive, but then Toronto at home in game 6 wins 3-2. They win the series 4-2, and they move on to the Stanley Cup final. The Stanley Cup final is famous or infamous, depending on your point of view on this. To this date, because as of a week ago, it almost happened again, but it didn't. This is the only time in a North American sports final, in a championship series, that a team is down 3-0 and wins the series in 7. So, and I'm talking championship final. It's happened 3-0 comebacks before. Obviously, Edmonton forced a Game 7 against Florida, but they did not win that Game 7. So Toronto is still the only team to do it. Detroit wins both games in Toronto to put the Leafs up against it. They win 3-2 and 4-2 respectively. And then they win 5-2 at home. So Game 4 is in Detroit. Toronto wins 4-3. And then the previously mentioned record is set. They score 9 in Game 5 to win 9-3. Before then going to Detroit and winning 3-0. So the momentum had absolutely shifted towards Toronto, and they used that to win Game 7 3-1 and win the series 4-3 for another Toronto Stanley Cup. So 1942 is a good year for Toronto. The interesting thing is, of course, we know that the New York Rangers won't win another Stanley Cup till 1994, which if you told them back in 42, I'm sure they would have said, nah, the Rangers are really good. They're a top team. They've got the best line in the league. But that's how that's going to work. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe in the event that you've not done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.